Hello, American History 1 and Honors American History 1 students. This will be Unit 1, Lecture 2 for Chapters 1/2. The title of this PowerPoint will be European Powers Carve Up North America. All right, competition for North America. So Spain is establishing an empire in Latin America, which would be the Caribbean islands, Mexico, Central America, and part of South America. And now other European nations want to establish colonies in the New World as well, especially in North America, present-day United States. And the three main competitors for North America are England, France, and the Netherlands. Early exploration of North America. So these three countries that I just mentioned will attempt to colonize or set up colonies in North America, France, England, and the Netherlands. So how did this start? So if we think back to world history, and if you remember talking about exploration, Ferdinand Magellan was the first person to circumnavigate the globe. Actually, Magellan did not actually circumnavigate the globe. He actually was killed off halfway through the voyage in what is now the present-day Philippines, and his other sailors and some other boats that he had captained did actually make the full circle around the globe. But because of his trip, he had shown to these other nations that it was possible to sail west to Asia, and they want to set out and find a route in the north, meaning France, England, and the Netherlands say, let's try to find a northwest passage to Asia, because Magellan and his crew found a southwest passage, and that southwest passage was leaving Europe, sailing west towards the Americas, and then sailing south around South America into the Pacific Ocean. So, they found what was called a southwest passage to Asia, and now these three countries want to find what is called a northwest passage. So the French were the first explorers to begin looking for this Northwest Passage in the early 1500s. The French do fail to find a passage in the north. Well, one of the reasons why they do fail is because the north is obviously very cold, and that ice packed and the frozen waters do not make it favorable for wooden ships at the time to break through the ice. They can't do it. So instead, they begin exploring the American continent. And in 1673, an explorer named La Salle explores the Mississippi River and claims the whole river valley for France. And at the bottom of the Mississippi River, he claims this land, Louisiana, in honor of the French King Louis. Okay, so basically the French will be sailing around what is present-day Canada, down the St. Lawrence River into the Great Lakes, and then down the Mississippi River, and I'll show that to you here in a few. By the mid-1700s, France has established an empire in North America. French colonists were mostly male, and they were interested in two things. They were interested in trade, and they were interested in hunting, and specifically the fur trade. The French were not interested in farming. Okay, so that's a little bit about the French and the types of things that they were interested in the mid. So looking at this map, you see that the French in blue, the area or the colonies that they control are present-day Canada, present-day Great Lakes region, and some Midwest states. In the red, you see the English and their holdings. They obviously have the 13 original colonies, which we'll talk about a little bit later. I would like for you to note where a lot of these cities are located in present-day United States. If you see Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, they are all located on the ocean or near waters. Same with the French. Now the French, they don't call them cities, they actually call them forts or trading posts, because if you remember, they were interested in the fur trade, so they're interested in hunting and then selling the furs. Okay, and then the orange part is the area that the French controlled during this time, or not the French, excuse me, the Spanish. The Spanish controlled the orange parts, which is present-day Florida, present-day Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. All right, so that kind of gives you a visual of the holdings and the areas that each of these three countries control during this time. The French, the French usually got along well with the Native Americans. The fur trade profited to both groups. Both groups profited and made money off of the fur trade. Um, and the French founded many North American cities, often as small forts or trading posts, like I had said before. And these cities would later be known as Montreal, Quebec, Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, and New Orleans. And these were all started first as French settlements. So those cities that I those cities that I just mentioned on the previous page are highlighted or pinpointed here on the map. So Quebec and Montreal up here in the upper right-hand corner, they sit on what I told you was the St. Lawrence River, the St. Lawrence Seaway, then enters into the Great Lakes. You see Detroit and Chicago, those two cities now sit on the Great Lakes, obviously. St. Louis, Missouri sits obviously in Missouri, but it borders the state of Illinois, and then the city of New Orleans down here in Louisiana. This blue squiggly line, the reason that it is squiggly is not because that's how they made the borders of the states, but this line is the Mississippi River. So St. Louis actually does sit on the Mississippi River. All right, so the French, obviously the best mode of transportation at the time is by boat, so that's why all these cities are located on waterways. Same thing with the original 13 colonies that I've talked about previously. The major cities, Boston, New York, Charleston, Philadelphia, all located on waterways. All right, let's talk about the English. So while the French and Spanish, while their explorations are making a profit, this inspires King James to also make a profit and also start his own explorations. So the first attempt at colonization was a failure. I'm sure we've heard of the Lost Colony. It was a failure at Roanoke Island here on the Outer Banks, better known as Manio, or later renamed as Manio. I guess some people still call it Roanoke Island as well. Sir Walter Raleigh's Lost Colony. In 1585, the first English child was born in the New World here on Roanoke Island. Her name was Virginia Dare. Obviously, some of us know the story of the Lost Colony. They have the settlement for a little bit. A group decides to go back to England to restock, resupply. When they come back to the colony here in the Carolinas, everybody is gone. And even today, they don't really know for sure where everybody went. So the king, King James, gives a new charter to a new group of English investors, and they start a new colony, and they travel and land in Virginia. And this will be the first permanent English colony in the Americas, and it is founded in 1607, and the name of that colony is Jamestown. All right, so Jamestown. So colonists at Jamestown faced many struggles. These investors that came over on the first few ships, on the first few voyages to Jamestown, they did not want to work. A lot of them were looking to get rich quick. Some of them were investors, some of them were businessmen, and some of them actually brought tests to test the ground soil and to look for gold. So they thought that they were going to find gold over here in Jamestown because they had heard stories of the Spanish conquistadors conquering the Aztec empires, and how the Aztec empires and Montezuma down in Mexico, how they had just piles of gold. And so that's basically what they thought they were going to run into when they got over here to Jamestown. They were just interested in getting rich. They were not farmers. They were not fishermen. They didn't want to do any of that stuff, and they really didn't know how to. So disease and starvation were very widespread in the very beginning. An important leader that came about, though, and pulling his people out of what was known as a starving time later on was John Smith, and he basically convinced them that, hey, obviously we're not going to get rich here very quickly. We're not just going to find gold laying around. That we're going to have to actually work the land and try to survive in Jamestown. So in 1612, the colonists plant an important cash crop. All right. So John Rolfe, who later marries the Indian chief's daughter, Pocahontas, he actually steals a tobacco seed or tobacco seeds from the Spanish. The Spanish at this time have the monopoly or have the means of producing and selling tobacco in Europe, and they do this from their colonies in the Caribbean islands because the soil is very rich down there. And so John Rolfe actually goes down to the Caribbean, steals some tobacco seeds, brings it back to Jamestown, plants it at Jamestown, and tobacco actually saves the colony because people back in Europe love tobacco and want to buy it. And the soil here in Jamestown, just up the road in Virginia from where we live right now, was great for them. So tobacco becomes popular in England, saves the colony. If you know the Disney movie Pocahontas, they actually have it wrong. John Rolfe marries Pocahontas. In the movie, they say John Smith does. We just talked about John Smith on the last slide. In 1619, the first representative government in the New World it was created or meets in Jamestown, and they call themselves the House of Burgess. The House of Burgess is a vocab question, but I would kind of describe it as Congress today. Obviously, Congress today is the whole United States. Well, Jamestown was just one town, so the House of Burgess was like their voting membership where they voted on rules and laws, but they called themselves the House of Burgess. So some historians claim that this is the first representative government at the time. So that's just a little bit of a background of the House of Burgess and vocab question. All right, so the second permanent colony that we're going to talk about is the New England colony or the Plymouth colony. In 1620, Pilgrims founded the second English colony in what is now known as Plymouth, Massachusetts. 10 years later, another group comes to the New England colonies, and they are called Puritans. Both of these groups were seeking religious freedom in the New World. If you go ahead and search like pilgrim, like what's the definition of a pilgrim? We kind of know the definition of a pilgrim as a person that is associated with Thanksgiving. A pilgrim was the people, like I just said, in the New England colonies that come because they were came over because they were being persecuted. But if you define the word pilgrim, pilgrim means anybody on a religious journey. Okay, so that's kind of like the basic definition of a pilgrim. So just to kind of separate the two, yes, we do call the Pilgrims the people who founded the second English colony in 1620, but a more basic definition would be someone on a religious journey. And these people were on a religious journey because they were being persecuted at the time. So just a little bit of a background for you there. The key difference between Jamestown colony and the New England colonies. The Jamestown colony was founded for profit, meaning they wanted to make money. It started out a little different. They thought that they were going to make money by finding gold over here and getting rich quick. They found out that that was not true. They found out that in order for them to make a profit in Jamestown, they needed to grow a cash crop, and that cash crop ended up being tobacco, and they made a lot of money on tobacco. So that's why Jamestown was founded. The New England colonies were founded for religious reasons. Okay, so they obviously came over, like I just said, because of due to religious persecution. So that was the difference between Jamestown colony and the New England colonies for the country of England. Okay, so just the distinction between the two. All right, so the Dutch, the last country that we're going to talk about here. In 1609, an explorer named Henry Hudson explores for the Netherlands. They sail into the Hudson Bay. What was then renamed or named for Henry Hudson was the Hudson Bay and up the Hudson River. So this area that we're talking about is the state of New York, New York City. The Hudson is the river that separates New York City, the Manhattan Island, from the whole state of New York. The Dutch founded or called this place New Netherlands and set up fur trading posts there as well. So the Dutch were kind of like the French, set up fur trading posts. Vocabulary words. We need to know the difference between New Netherlands and New Amsterdam. Okay, I'll give you a hint. One of them, New Amsterdam or New Netherlands, one refers to New York City, the other refers to the whole state of New York. So some vocab terminology there. Allows settlers from many different areas, so meaning the Dutch allowed people to come and live in their colony from many different areas, many different countries. People could kind of move about the colony. They didn't persecute you. So basically, their colony was very open to everybody. The Dutch make an exit in 1664. English drive the Dutch from New Netherlands, and then they rename the city New York. So I just kind of give you a hint there, alluding back to my question there for the vocab words New Netherlands and New Amsterdam. So now the English take control of the entire East Coast, like we see on the slide, a couple slides back, in the red portions, and the English will eventually control most of the East Coast except for Florida, and we'll we now know them as the original 13 colonies, and we'll get more into those here in a couple lectures. All right, so that's it for lecture 2. If you have any questions, as always, email me.